I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the National Center on Nonprofit Enterprise, and I guess also on behalf of the Mandel School, since I'm I'm affiliated with that as well as an emeritus professor. Um, as you know, the purpose of this program is really to try to help prepare nonprofit leaders for this new age in which we seem to be engaged, an age of crises and crises management and a lot of uncertainty in the environment. Um, the 100-year events that seem to come every year now, whether it be a recession or a storm or a pandemic or even an internal crisis. The idea of this program is that we really need to take another look at how we approach the management of nonprofit organizations. Not so much to be uh, so focused on narrow issues of performance that we neglect the viability and the resilience of the organization. So we think that we really need to look at the management of nonprofits in a new way, and this whole program is designed around that concept. Um, we have, beginning with Elizabeth, I think put together a great faculty of folks from all around the country, different universities that study nonprofit organizations, and they are going to lead each of the 10 modules that we have that are scheduled, and I hope you can participate in as many of those as you can. We are indebted to some of the funders that have allowed us to get this started with some upfront capital, so to speak, particularly Dick Pogue, who is an emeritus partner in the law firm Jones Day. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that very important firm that's headquartered here in Cleveland, but Dick has been just very generous and critical in terms of giving us some upfront funds that we could work with, as well as several members of the board of the National Center of Nonprofit Enterprise. Also, a shout out, and hopefully he'll join us at some point, to Rob Fisher, who will be giving one of our uh, one of our modules. Faculty member and leader of the nonprofit program at the Mandel School at Case Western Reserve. We are using the Mandel School's platform here, and Rob has been a particularly important member of the team to put this program together. We've had great staff work from our executive director, Stuart Mandel, who is here with us, and Eric Vokes, a consultant that may be able to join us. So, let's get started. I mean, we're very enthusiastic about kicking this off, and we thank you for being the first. I see we've been joined by Roland Kushner, who is one of our presenters later in the program. Roland is at Muhlenberg College in Pennsylvania, and he'll be talking about balance sheet um, resilience later on. I don't have the exact date in front of me, but you have it on the poster. So really pleased to kick this off with Elizabeth Searing leading the way. She's really done some important scholarship over the last few years on what I would now call resilience, but the whole field of both the ecology and the economics of nonprofit organizations and how they thrive, how they grow, how they run into trouble and need to be addressed in various ways. I've known Elizabeth since her graduate days. For better or for, I think it's not a dubious distinction that she was my PhD student, and that was an honor for me. And and she has been a faculty member at the University at Albany in New York, and recently has moved to the University of Texas at Dallas, where I think she's closer to her native roots. And I'm sure they miss her in Albany already. but Elizabeth and I have conspired on a number of things recently, including a book you may have run into called The Social Enterprise Zoo. And we're continuing to look at the operations and development of I would call social purpose organizations. Just the core of that is nonprofit, but taking into account all of these new forms and trying to understand how they work as well and what it takes for them to survive and grow and be viable. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Elizabeth. I think she's got a great day planned for you, and I'm going to sit in as long as I possibly can.
So really, why are we here? Well, it's not like running a nonprofit was ever easy. We're delivering programs, we're raising funds through any number of a dozen different ways. We're satisfying so many stakeholders while following so many rules. How many pennies out of every dollar are you spending on indirect costs? Everyone seems to have an opinion on that, even if those that are asking can't tell you exactly what an indirect cost is. But I think that the last few years have really turned up something really special for those of us in the nonprofit sector. Whether it seems like the more that we try, the more we find ways to cause even more need. So the refugee crisis, the economic crisis in Venezuela, the Flint, Michigan water catastrophe, the violence in Myanmar, climate change, and then boom. Then we got kind of what at first seemed like the one crisis that changed absolutely everything. But it kind of makes you think of all of the pivoting that we have done over the last 18 months. Is it really just this one time that we've had to be this creative? Is this surely isn't the one time where you've had to call your board together or your management staff and said, okay, this has happened and we really need to think about how we're going to handle this situation. And I think that even though the COVID pandemic is certainly something that is exceptional, it isn't the first time that we have all had to address crisis. It's not the first time that we as nonprofits have had to struggle with resiliency. A report just a few by a scholar named Brown and her co-authors in 2013 actually found that 5% of nonprofits with 50 grand or more in annual revenue closed during the 2008 to 2012 period. So if anyone remembers that recession, now that we've been through COVID, that's about a full 1% higher than closures in the previous 4-year period. And about 1 out of every 10 of nonprofits in that period dipped below the 50K reporting threshold for the IRS. Compared to 8% in the previous period. So it's not that this may be the biggest time, but it's definitely not the first time that we have faced a situation where we have needed to be resilient. But I do think that it has given us the opportunity for the rest of society to start thinking about us and our sector and our organizations and resilience. So I'm just one of a team of instructors that have gathered to talk to you about resilience through these modules. And the tools that you are going to leave these modules with can be used really regardless of the situation. So this isn't, COVID may have brought us here, but this is not going to be a COVID-focused training program. Now, are some situations going to require more pivoting than others? Yes, probably. Are we all totally sick of the word pivot. Yes, probably. But the tactics, I think, themselves are very much the same. So why do you do this? Why do you show up every day at your nonprofit related job? Whether it's because you're a staff or a board member or a capacity builder or a volunteer. I really am curious. For me, you can see kind of off to the side my own family's why. We have a big event coming up in North Texas in a couple weeks here called North Texas Giving Day, where it's kind of a regional giving day, but one that's wildly successful. And one of the extremely nifty practices that they have is that they will send you an email reminding you of the giving that you made the year before. And so this is actually from that email, reminding me of the places that my family, and I allow everyone, everyone in the family, kids, adults, whatever, donates to a different cause. So our why for 2020, you can see we care a lot about dogs. We care a lot about wildlife, and we care about family and community empowerment. And so I think that's part of the family's why, according to the North Texas Giving Day. But as far as my own personal why, I think that kind of goes back to my own narrative. Why do I do this? Well, because I have spent time as an entrepreneur, and I have, spent time where, there were periods of life that weren't as fabulous as others. And so I want to be able to take my knowledge and my degree and network and be able to give back, help others, keep them from having to go through some of my own experiences. And I think that being able to reach inside and touch that is key to me personally being able to move forward through the road bumps that I encounter kind of on a day-to-day basis. So I think that there are a lot of reasons why, possibly. I've heard, because we should, because we care, because it's our job. Like I'm paid to show up at a nonprofit, like I'm paid to show up at McDonald's. So that's why I show up. Because we can, because others won't, because it makes a difference. I think I've heard probably all of these, and they're not really mutually exclusive. But I'm curious, what is your why?
I think this discussion also points out why it's so important to examine this issue of resilience in the nonprofit sector. I mean, all kinds of organizations, of businesses, government, everybody's worried about resilience, but think about what's lost if we lose a nonprofit. I mean, sure, in the for-profit sector, we all have our favorite stores, coffee shops, restaurants, movie theaters. Those are all important in a way, but the fact that we've got such important institutions in the nonprofit sector, it's different if we lose a local hospital or a local college or a homeless shelter or a symphony hall or a museum, and those things are so integral to our lives that the issue of resilience is that much more important. And I think that's part of, in terms of personal motivation, I think that's part of what has motivated me in this quest to sort of help nonprofits become more resilient, become better managed, and so forth. Resilience is a positive thing. It's not just warding off terrible situations, but it's maintaining a position so that one can continue to do one's mission and to grow in that. You can't, you can't do that unless you're resilient and you're able to look forward rather than simply, crouch in a defensive position.
What the definition of resilience is up to this point, because it has been it has been the subject of fascination before, but each, I would say, group of people have had kind of their own angle on what resilience is, and so understanding where it's been, I think, will be really informative on where where we should try and push it today. So first, really the first movers, like on the academic side, when we started talking about nonprofit resiliency and its kind of counterpart, nonprofit vulnerability, a lot of that work was infused by the business literature, by people that studied business, particularly, I think, individuals who worked with accounting ratios, financial factors such as what's on your balance sheet, what is your revenue, where are your expenses going. These kinds of financial factors had been used by for-profit researchers to try and predict which businesses were going to go bankrupt. And on the for-profit side, it's pretty easy. You predict bankruptcy. There's a list of bankruptcies, and so these really complicated models emerged in the middle of the 20th century about how to accurately predict when a for-profit company was going to go bankrupt. And so in the early 90s, nonprofit researchers started trying to do something similar for the nonprofit sector. And they encountered a couple problems. The biggest one of which was that nonprofits can technically declare bankruptcy, but not a whole lot of us do. And especially in the US, the IRS wasn't really on top of the registrations as far as kicking people out for not filing for a very long time. We didn't have an updated list of who actually was still a tax-exempt nonprofit. And so researchers that were trying to put together this really kind of clean ability to predict that all of the business researchers had put together really struggled because they didn't have essentially something to predict. So they came up with this definition of financial vulnerability, and this started with these accounting ratios. And you'll see a lot of different studies on this slide and on some of the other ones. Feel free, if any of them are interesting to you, just hop over to Google Scholar and plug them in, and you should be able to pull up the information. If you are interested in any of the articles that either I talk about in depth or are just citations on the page, and you can't access them because of some kind of crazy journal paywall, please reach out to me. I have definite opinions on journal paywalls. And would be happy to help you access the article that you're interested in. Just email me directly. And so this is where the nonprofit study of at least vulnerability started. Then kind of over time, non-financial factors started to come in. So it's not just about the accounting ratios. Instead, it can be about non-financial things like mission drift. So if an organization has this kind of clear mission, and then they start adding things, or maybe we'll just go for this grant, even though it's not exactly what we do, and it starts to drift away, the dissonance that might cause with funders or with staff can cause organizations problems and can contribute to organizational closure, or things like staff conflict. So if you have to if the executive director and the CFO are always at each other and butting heads, then that can be problematic for the survival of the organization. I've personally done research looking at the different types of staff conflict. So if in the study that I did with mental health organizations in upstate New York, actually, if there was conflict with an entity outside of the organization, so that it was kind of an us versus them, especially if the them was either the state government, or downstate, because in New York, and Eric, you might hear me on this, there is a big difference if you live in upstate New York about upstate versus downstate. So if you could rally yourself against the downstate organizations, then that kind of conflict actually gave you a boost and contributed to your resiliency. But if there was fighting within the organization, then that was much more problematic and contributed to your vulnerability. So, but then there started to be kind of variations on this vulnerability idea. So there was the adoption of kind of this system thinking framework. And you'll see a lot of that through the modules that we talk about. So it's really, it's helpful to think only about your own organization when thinking about resilience. But we need to expand really to have a complete picture and to really contribute to the resiliency of both you within the network and the resiliency of the network itself. Also the importance of context. So not surprisingly, outside of the United States, things looked a little bit different in terms of what made nonprofits vulnerable than within the United States. And then there have just been more creative uses of those accounting ratios. So like I mentioned earlier, sometimes it feels like all we do is talk about money when we talk about resiliency and vulnerability. It's not true, but the money is there. So accounting ratios still are in pretty popular usage. But I still think, even as a contributor to these kinds of studies, that this is limited, because the focus on essentially not dying as the definition of resiliency is shallow. And already today, just in kind of what we've been walking in with, we know that resiliency is a little bit more than that. So let's talk about what the ecologists contributed to this. So with apologies to any ecologists in the audience, and it didn't sound like we had any, ecology sounds really complicated. So we're looking at the picture that we've got on the screen right now. There's like Greek letters, and that can be really off-putting. But think about it this way: who has heard of the wolves and the deer? Okay, so this was a math. I want to say this was a math project that I had when I was younger, where they illustrated essentially that the deer population. So if all of a sudden you're in an area that's got a deer population, and then that deer population goes up, then pretty soon, like not immediately, but soon enough, the wolf population is going to go up. And then when the wolf population goes up, the deer population is going to go back down. And so it's not like the wolves and the deer hang out. They're not having meetings and coordinating resiliency strategies. But the existence and interplay of those two populations influence the size of both groups. And so that's kind of, I would say, a simpler way of thinking about the contribution of ecology. So this chart essentially says something similar. This is called a Holling loop, based on the kind of biological ecological work of Holling in 1973, which emphasized things like complexity, what happens with a catastrophic external shock, and that it isn't just about continued survival. And that's where it kind of differentiates than where the nonprofit stuff started. It's not just about survival. It's also about continuing to function. So in this Holling loop, we'll walk through it and then we're going to move on to something that I think is a little bit more straightforward. So we'll see up in the quadrant with the alpha. So we've got the alpha there that's blue, and it stands for reorganization, as you can see on the little tab. Reorganization, so there's rapid change. So some kind of destabilizing event happens. And so then we enter a period of rapid change. Everyone is scrambling. After that, I have to move around. All of your faces are there right on top of the on top of my Holling loop, so I can't see what's on the other side of it. So we have the K. Move you over. There we go. So we have the K, the kappa, which is conservation. So actually, let's not go that way. Let's start where the arrows are. So now that I can see the entire thing, let's actually start. So we've got the shock, and we have the exploitation, which is the new systems. And we're extracting resources. There are new institutions emerge, new political and social relationships happen. This moves into conservation, which is kind of a gradual construction of this new kind of stable state. Then this goes into release, so the capital is freed, and then we go back into reorganization. It's a loop. So basically we see ebbs and flows of different things happening. We have a shock, we have things break, then we have things stabilize, then we have people specialize, and then things break again. There's a much what I would consider simpler way of looking at this in the next slide, which is from the Journal of Rural Studies. And it answers the question, so what happens to small family farms during a crisis? And so I think this is much more useful than all of the Greek letters. So you have this, this shock happen. So let's look we have the shock here in the upper right. We see shock. There is what is called the release of resources. You see the person saying, oh no, collapse, things, bad things are happening, there's creative destruction, but at the same time there is creative destruction, there is also this new opportunity. And this is kind of what Stuart was talking about, how there is this innovation. Bad things are happening, but new opportunities are happening as well. This causes new connections to happen. It causes people to try new things. Things are working, and now we are in a new growth phase that will then start over in where we see growing, adapting, and gathering resources. So
Elizabeth, if I could interrupt you, because this is fascinating to me anyway. So when the direction of the route, I guess the route is going down in terms of efficiency. And I'm going to guess that's efficiency the way it's currently considered, costs and outcomes and effective spending of dollars. So what this is suggesting to me is dollars are needed to create the connections, I guess. Is that what the diagram is?
Yes. And I think that that's a very, very succinct way of putting it. So efficiency is going to go down because in trying to build resiliency, and this is something that is going to be one of the main themes that we'll see today, building resiliency requires slack. And slack is not, according to a neoclassical economist, efficient. So we're not hitting the steady state equilibrium. You know, revenues are not equaling expenses. We need to build in slack. And so according to the most straightforward definition of efficiency, that means it is an inefficient concept, but it's one that helps us live longer because it increases our resiliency. So excellent, excellent point there. Getting out of the picture and moving our thumbnail back over to the side where it's generally out of the way. Kind of. So let's go into what I would consider to be more the modern study of nonprofit resilience. And these are ones that are starting to get a lot more into actual management tactics. And notably, they're ones that are actually starting to use the word resilience instead of focusing on the dying. We're focusing on the continuing to be alive and continuing to function. Remember, we had started to get into nonprofits a little bit back in the business literature, but scholars such as myself, we seized on the idea back then that we could predict something that was kind of like bankruptcy, but we knew even then that that was only part of the story. So the literature has, academics have moved from studying how not to die towards studying how to live, which is important. Now, a lot of this is still going to be financy, but not all of it. Most of these studies now involve researchers getting out there and talking to people about what is going on, which sounds shocking, but there is a large portion of academic literature, and I say this as an academic that has contributed to that literature. There's a lot out there that just really works with the numbers, but it's not enough. And fortunately, there's more and more research being produced that is about these strategies that come from actually talking to people. So I'm going to go into depth on two of these studies that I think are particularly interesting.